Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories. Please like and subscribe, and hit that notification icon so you never miss out. Now on with the stories.
This is a long one, so I'll just post part 1 and post more of the story later if there's any interest. I recently bought a house in a small subdivision. One family used to own all the land in this area and sold off chunks of it to be developed. In the case of my subdivision, they still owned land on both sides of it and wanted a way to get back and forth easily. So, they retained an easement, granting rights to their family only, along one side of the subdivision. Basically, a gravel road that runs next to the property line in the backyards of several houses. Some time ago, the family sold off the other property on the far side, and told the homeowners in the subdivision they didn't need to use the easement anymore, and the neighbors could do what they wanted with that land. The neighbors at that time had a handshake agreement to keep the gravel road accessible, so the neighbors could use it a couple times a year for backyard maintenance. My house is the first one along the street, so it controls the access for the rest of the neighbors. But, by the time I bought the house, tree branches had grown over the gravel road and nobody had used it for several years. The seller told me I'd have the right to fence in the area if I wanted to. Fast forward to buying the house, and having my small kids chase one too many balls into the street. I decided I needed to build a fence not only for privacy, but to keep them safe. The VP of the HOA board has a house further down the gravel road, and it turns out he wants access to it again, and he's also the only one on the architectural committee and would have to approve any fences. Instead of approving my fence, he sent me a certified letter with all the legal reasons that he had rights to use the gravel road. First, he says he has been using that gravel road since before there was even a house built on my lot, and he didn't need anyone's permission to use it. Which doesn't seem to make sense, because the other lots besides his are private property, so he would legally need someone's permission even without a house on them. Second, he claims that the easement was established for the subdivision, meaning he thinks just because the easement is there, everyone has rights to use it. But in reality, nobody in the subdivision has rights in the actual recorded easement, only the original family. Third, he claims that his use of the gravel road for more than 10 years gives him something called a prescriptive easement. But, in my state, it takes a lot more than that to prove a prescriptive easement. In particular, since the homeowners allowed their neighbors to use that area, their use was not considered adverse, and therefore can't be used to claim a prescriptive easement. The way the courts look at it, if you are being nice to one of your neighbors by giving them permission to use part of your property, they can't come back later and try to use this against you to take away your rights. The certified letter was also signed by our HOA president. So I wrote to him and asked, what's all this stuff then? And isn't it a conflict of interest for the VP to be involved in any board decisions around this, since it affects him personally? So I wrote to the HOA president stating that I would like to work something out with the neighbors to give them permission to continue using the gravel road as they had done in the past. But I questioned why the HOA is trying to get involved with my private property, not common HOA property, when they have no legal authority. I also pointed out that all the legal reasons the VP sent me in his letter were not valid legal arguments and basically made no sense. The president responded that since none of us are lawyers, and, ignoring the clear conflict of interest, that the VP had hired a lawyer to get a legal opinion on the matter so that we can all move forward and be in compliance with state law. Soon, I received a letter from his lawyer. It contained the exact same incorrect legal arguments as the versus P's original letter, sometimes using the exact same words, that the VP had used the gravel road since before my house was built and therefore didn't require permission. False, because the lots that the easement ran through were all private property. Also irrelevant for any modern-day take on the situation, that the recorded easement was established for the subdivision and therefore it gave the VP some rights. Also false, because the recorded easement only gives rights to the previous landowner and nobody else. The easement is shown on the subdivision's plat map. However, it has a number that references the recorded one. Summary: I want to build a fence around my backyard. The HOA VP is worried it will restrict his access to an easement going through the area, which he has been using but without any legal rights. The easement was granted to a property not within the HOA. The other neighbors along the easement have fenced-in yards. Their fences not reaching the back of their properties but allowing room for the easement owner to use a gravel road. This easement owner has told everyone years ago that he no longer needs access, So any fence on my property would just have to consider the use by the other neighbors, even though they have no legal rights. Because of large trees on my property, it's impossible to build a fence in line with the rest of the neighbors. I asked the HOA what if I built a fence just past the trees, still allowing an access road 12 feet wide. This would basically cut my backyard in half. They said no, that was too narrow, even though the road on the rest of their properties averages 12 feet in width due to fencing or landscaping. So, I submitted plans for a fence that goes all the way around the property, with gates on each end of the gravel road, to mitigate the fact that there is still a legal easement through the property, just in case, and that I planned on giving the neighbors permission to go through there a couple times a year as they have been accustomed to. The HOA wrote back and said they consulted with a lawyer who said my property is servient to the easement which they all have rights to. So giving the neighbors permission was not good enough. I would have to sign something agreeing to give the neighbors permanent use of my property. The gates would need to be equipped with keypads and they would be given the codes. They would have the rights to use it 24/7. I told them obviously I was not going to agree to this. A few weeks later, they sent another email, rescinding their permission to build a fence, demanding that I trim the trees along the easement area to allow the VP to get through, or, according to the CC&Rs, they would hire a landscaper to come on my property, trim my trees, and bill me for it. There's nothing in the CC&Rs about trimming trees for this reason, or anything about governing the easement at all. The HOA and properties within the HOA are not granted any rights. The HOA should not even be involved with this at all, except for the VP ignoring his conflict of interest, ignoring his fiduciary duties, and abusing his position within the HOA to try and get what he wants. I told them to stay the hell off my property and that they'd be hearing from my lawyer, and put up chains with no trespassing signs on each end of the gravel road. Any ideas of giving neighbors permission to use that area are now history. I saw some advice in a different Reddit sub: never argue with stupid people, because they don't know they're stupid. Which really sums up this situation, except I have no choice. The stupid people in question run the HOA and are in a position to abuse their powers. A quick summary: there's an easement belonging to a third party running through the yards of several houses in the HOA, including mine. The HOA VP is trying to abuse his position on the board to prevent me from building a fence until I agree to give him permanent access to this easement area, which he does not have any legal rights to. Lied to me and hired a lawyer to also lie to me. So after this, I emailed everyone in the HOA and said that things were getting ugly and I am hiring a lawyer to go after with the HOA board who are involved in self-dealing, which is a serious breach of their fiduciary duties. The HOA president emailed everyone back and said the board is just trying to get me to recognize a legally recorded easement, which I am refusing to do. So now the president is lying to the other HOA members about me to make it look like I'm the one causing problems. Ironically, I'm the only one who does recognize the legally recorded easement, and the fact that it only gives rights to the people recorded in the easement, not everyone in the whole neighborhood. I hired a lawyer who didn't think it was worth my time to go after the HOA board for all the illegal actions they were trying to take against me. Instead, he simply wrote a letter to the VP's $30 per month legal shield idiot lawyer stating, just because the easement runs through the versus P's yard, that doesn't give him any rights to use it where it goes through other people's yards. The only easement rights are granted to the people within the recorded document, pointing to an appropriate previous case. Just because the easement runs through the land that was subdivided into the HOA, that doesn't give the HOA or its members any rights to use it. The only rights are granted to the people within the recorded document, pointing to an appropriate previous case. Since the previous owner of my house has already said the neighbor's use of the easement area wasn't adverse, no prescriptive easement could have been created. Stay off my property or we will initiate legal action against him. I asked my lawyer what's next, and he said it's professional courtesy for the other lawyer to respond and to provide some further guidance. Of course, this never came. A quick summary: my HOA VP was trying to use his position as a board member to fraudulently gain access to an easement on my property which he had no rights to, and to prevent me from building a fence on my own property. Eventually, lawyers got involved, so the HOA president finally hired their own lawyer to review the situation. He told them they were wrong about everything and me and my lawyer were right about everything the whole time. The HOA finally agreed nobody within the HOA had any rights to use my property and I could build my fence. I think it's probably illegal for the HOA to spend money on a lawyer for this, since it is not for the benefit of all the HOA members The majority of households have nothing to do with the easement issue, but their money is being spent on it. I asked the HOA president, "Hey, wait a minute. You had a lawyer saying that I had to give the VP access to the easement. But now your lawyer says that's not right." "Is it the same lawyer?" He said no. It was a pro bono lawyer who previously advised him. He refused to identify who this previous lawyer was or explain why he would do any pro bono for an HOA. He said there was no letter of engagement with this lawyer and no bills, emails, or letters between them. I suspect that if this lawyer even exists, it's probably somebody of his that is either retired or not licensed in this state. Nonetheless, this is not getting valid legal advice that his fiduciary duties would require. None of this HOA business was done in open meetings as required by my state law. None of it was voted on by the board. There were no meeting notes, and in fact no meetings, and they would not provide me access to HOA documents, emails, bills, etc., as required by law. This was just the HOA president and VP just getting together to try and screw me over. I don't think the other board members were even consulted about this or even made aware of what was going on. So, I explained that since they had caused all these problems in the first place and continued to make them worse by refusing to follow the laws regarding HOA governance, forcing me to hire a lawyer to defend against them, that the HOA would at the very least be paying my legal fees. The HOA president said they were not paying anything, case closed. I then sent demand letters to all the HOA board members informing them that they would all be sued personally for violation of HOA governance laws if I was not reimbursed within 7 days. This must have lit a fire under someone's ass because the HOA's insurance company called me up and wanted to settle. I agreed not to sue them in exchange for the insurance paying the full amount of my legal bills. I also asked that the HOA board issue an apology on my behalf to all of the homeowners, but they refused. I have come to the conclusion that the HOA president and VP, and I have come across similar people in my life for comparison, are the kind of people who will just habitually lie about everything without shame or hesitation if it benefits them. And they got so used to lying without people calling them on it, that they don't even know when they're lying, and would actually get offended if anyone accused them of it. So knowing what these people are like, are they going to manage the HOA properly, or will they cause more problems in the future? Stay tuned for part 6. To catch up from previous posts, I moved into a new house, and the HOA VP wanted to gain access to an easement in my backyard which he had no legal rights to. So instead he tried abusing his status as a board member, as well as committing various types of fraud. The HOA president went right along with all of this. Eventually, I hired a lawyer and threatened to sue the board members personally, and I was reimbursed my legal fees by the HOA's insurance. The terms of the settlement were that I would not sue them, and they would stay the hell off my property. Which leads us to the current post. I sat back and waited to see what other kinds of crap they would pull, and didn't have to wait long. On 4th of July, some neighborhood kids were playing with fireworks, and set a hedge on fire. This hedge is adjacent to the HOA president's property, but is actually on his next-door neighbor's property. Fast forward to the financial summary being emailed out before the yearly HOA meeting. Turns out, the president used the HOA insurance to pay to replace the part of the hedge that was burned, even though the HOA had no liability for it being burned, and it is not on HOA common property. Of course, since it's next to his house, he figured he would just use HOA insurance to pay for it. None of the homeowners in the HOA were happy about using our insurance for this. Well, as it turns out, they also weren't informed about using the HOA insurance to pay my legal bills either. So, I absolutely unloaded on the HOA president and VP, and emailed everyone my whole story from the beginning, and pointed out every time they had lied to me and committed fraud, etc. And not only did they use HOA insurance to pay for my lawyer, they used HOA funds to pay for their lawyer, illegally, since our C&Cs do not agree to pay the board's personal legal fees. So what happened next? Anybody who's spent any time reading the relationship advice forums on Reddit probably knows the answer. DARVO, deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. This is a tactic used by psychological abusers. Now, I have dealt with and prevailed over plenty of stupid assholes in my life, but these two were different. They took being stupid assholes to the next level. It's like being a stupid asshole is their superpower. They should go around wearing spandex outfits with Captain Stupid Asshole printed on them. Because I had accused them of doing the things that they did, now they were the victims and I was the offender. And because of this, the entire board resigned. They also took one last chance to lie to the other homeowners about me, saying that I had broken the legal agreement I made with them. The agreement was not to sue them, but nothing to prevent me from talking about it. So I have no idea what they were thinking, other than they just like to make up lies. The bad part is most of the homeowners were on their side, because they have been such good neighbors. They don't know or care about all the legal ins and outs, and did not care that they tried to scam one of their fellow HOA members. I offered to show anybody who cared all the evidence, but nobody took me up on it. So it basically turns out these two board members are old-school psychological abusers. They've been abusers since before I was even alive. Long before Reddit existed, long before the internet existed, and long before there even was a term for Darvo. I don't need to go into details here, but from what I know about their families, it all makes total sense now. So I was outmatched. I didn't hire a lawyer and sue them right away because I thought they would be reasonable and that I could work things out for the good of the HOA. But in the end, I'm the one that comes out looking like an idiot. If I knew all of this back then, I would have simply sued them immediately and then used all their fraudulent actions against them in court. The good news is, we have new board members that we are on good terms with. As far as the rest of the homeowners, well, I guess that's how you get bad board members and why HOAs have such a bad reputation, that most homeowners don't know what's going on, or care what's going on. It lets these psychological abuser types become board members who can then make life hell for anyone that gets in their way. In the end, the stupid asshole board members took what easily could have been a win-win situation for everyone, and turned it into a win-lose situation where they were the losers. Hopefully this will be the last update on my HOA story.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.